Hey guys, Matt, IronTrap Garage, and today we are working on the Schroll 32 Coupe project, specifically the frame. So it was a big relief last time to get the big giant pile of rusty metal and jagged brackets cut off of the frame and kind of leave us with what we need to repair. So what I need to work on today is getting some of the spots that were kind of ugly or we had to cut around a really ugly weld and get them repaired. We had a bunch of requests in the comments of people that had similar problems on their frames and wanted to see how I would tackle those. So we're going to go into more in depth with that today and kind of show you some of that. So I'm going to work my way from the front to the back and hopefully have something that's not quite as jagged and looks like there's like shark bites out of my frame. Hopefully it all goes pretty smoothly. So this is common when you get into this old hot rod stuff, is they just kind of threw the stuff together. So I can already tell that they must have been running way smaller bolts in this or something. We cut the studs out, but the holes don't even line up for where the radiator was. I guess if you're running like way too small of bolts maybe, but definitely not right. So I have a feeling that this radiator isn't even centered on the chassis. So I think what I'm going to do before we can even get to fixing things is get this radiator so that it's centered where the holes are in the brackets are actually centered. So get some clamps set here, and then we can gonna have to probably set the laser up straight away and just run it down the car just to or down the frame just to get an idea and quickly get this thing where it needs to sit. Alright, so I got my laser set up so I know roughly where we're at. I actually wasn't too far off with my marks, but what I'm going to do is just see how far off or what happened here, why this might not be centered. So I'm going to line it up with one of our bowl holes here. And wow, that's... So if I line it up with the bowl hole on the driver's side, we are, I don't know, half an inch or 3/4 of an inch off of center. This thing was sitting towards the driver's side, and if we go the other direction, we're about the same. So I don't think either of these holes were ever correct, to be honest. So I'm going to have to try and kind of cheat it to get it where it needs to be. So we're still come to the driver's side. Thought this was going to be a welding video, but it's going to be a laser video. Just about there. Right about there is close, and we're actually pretty close on both bolt holes. So I'm wondering if these brackets just got bent over time, or when they bent them they didn't line up. I don't know, but I got it pretty close. So I would bet this thing was off when it was on the car. So it's pretty close. So I'm going to clamp that at least there. And I think we can use this one of these holes possibly. Alright, so I got that first hole reamed like you guys saw, and that didn't take too much to get that fixed. But then I started looking at where the hole needed to be for this side. And I know it's hard to see, but we're like sort of in the hole but not quite, but we're going to end up running off the end of the bracket. We're getting dangerously close to being really thin. And I started looking at the brackets themselves. So if you look at this bracket here, it is pretty close to, pretty straight, 90-degree bend on there. Great, that works fine. If you look at this side, there is a little like whoop or tweak in this one. And it looks like what they did is they actually bent this in a little bit here to get it to line up. And this one doesn't, isn't perfectly straight. So trying to retain, the soul, like I talk about so much of these old cars. Initially, most of us, if we have OCD or perfectionists, you'd want to just take both these brackets all the way off, get rid of them, create some kind of new bracket that's real fancy and space age. But what I'm going to do is work with it. So I think if I put the same little like bend in the other one, I can get the hole to line up on it, and I don't have to open up the other side, and it'll work out just fine. That's really all it needs, is just to move over just a little bit. So what I'm going to do is take the torch and heat right about here where the other one is bent, and then try and take a hammer and just tap on it a little bit, and that'll get it to kind of just naturally get a little bit of a bend in. Worst case, I might have to heat another spot, or tweak another little spot down here to get everything flat and level. But I think by just doing that and moving it over just I don't know, like an 1/8 inch or so, it'll probably get us right in the ballpark where we can drop the bolt down in. So I'm gonna try that. I like using the fire wrench on some of this stuff. It's kind of satisfying. So I'm using technically it would be like a welding tip. It's like a one tip, number one. And the reason I'm doing that is I want a pretty small focused area That's how it's done, ladies and gentlemen. Alright, so here was kind of one of the reasons I wanted to mount the grill and radiator, other than suspecting that they weren't straight, was they notched out, like, they did this like huge notch out for the grill, which they kind of just did with a cutting torch, obviously. And like here, they didn't even get it notched all the way. And then on the other side, also notched. And it's just pretty crude. So at the very least, I want to try and like make these a little more symmetrical, and like this one here is like against the grill, so that's not good. It's just going to chip paint if we go to put it back together. So now that I have the grill and the radiator kind of mounted exactly where they need to be, I can go through here and make templates, and we'll make a template so that everything fits a little bit nicer and is symmetrical. We'll weld those pieces in, and it'll just look a little better. We're still going to keep it like notched like they did back in the day, but just maybe make it a little more symmetrical. Just look like we tried a little harder than they did. But you know, this is the stuff we got to fix. So I'm going to start by making some paper patterns and figure out what looks good, and then we can kind of go from there. All right, so I cut out with my bench shear and using a flap disc and stuff. I shaped up these 3 and number 4 pieces that will fix these little chumps in the frame rail here. So the way I'm going to do these, this frame rail, it's actually where they cut it out is actually right on a bend. So rather than trying to exactly match the bend off of the car or off the frame, what I'm going to do is tack it back in the back there, and then kind of start working it down with a hammer. It'll be a little easier when the stuff's warm, and also once I have it tacked, we can get the fill in there. So I basically just take these pieces and I bevel the edges so we can get good penetration there, and then I also bevel the top of the frame rail here, treat it a lot like I do with the sheet metal stuff, just hotter. So we're going to try and get almost full penetration if possible when we're welding, and we're focusing on trying to get that full penetration because we're making the weld disappear. We're not trying to leave the weld visible, so we're going to actually try and get real good penetration in here through all these welds, and then eventually I'll end up flipping the frame upside down, and I can get on the back side, and then on this one, the underside of this one as well. I'm just doing everything I can with the frame flipped this way so we can test fit our radiator and our grill to make sure it all jives with the little notches we made. So I'm going to start tacking stuff up and hammering around, and hopefully get these 4 pieces welded in place pretty quickly. Alright, got the grill and the radiator all mounted up. It definitely is easier to leave them together and mount as one piece in this car at least. But show you guys what I did. I finished out this patch I did to basically as nice as it needs to be. It's pretty much metal finished, at least my patch area is pretty nice, but obviously it's pitted around it, so you know I can't really do anything about that too much. But yeah, that looks good. I like how it kind of tucks right in real tight. We'll just have to take some care when we put the grill in, obviously, that everything is there's clearance in there, plenty of clearance, but we're gonna have to just take some care, obviously, when the thing's painted and done, you know, to put everything in very carefully. But I think when it's all mounted up, it looks pretty bitchin'. You know, it doesn't, we don't have that huge chunk out of the frame rails, the frame horns on both sides. So we just got that little notch there that, you know, from above looks really good. So now that I got that section done, I'm gonna move my way back here to these offensive areas. So I'm gonna work on these top pieces. The bottom, you know, I'm gonna probably need to flip the frame over to really get to those areas correctly. You can see this side's pretty rough as well. So I'm gonna work on the top section here. I did the top and bottom there because I wanted to make sure the radiator and grill fit and was all good there. But I'm gonna work on these top pieces and kind of work my way along the top, getting into some of this that's, we need to grind off the ugly weld and everything. A little spot there, I ended up having to cut into it a little bit. I'll repair, and we'll keep working our way back. But if I can get all those pieces fixed and they look like this, I will be pretty darn happy. Alright, so next thing to address on the Schroll frame here, now that I got these couple little shark bites fixed, is this area where the steering box was mounted. They had torched out and like re-welded some of the holes for the steering box when they mounted in the steering box, and then of course they did this big Basically, I think they just took an adjustable wrench and bent the crap out of the frame to try right here to try and get it to clearance it. So I grabbed a steering box out of storage, and I wanted to check out, you know, how this fit and see if we can make a little bit more elegant, if you will, of a way to fix this. Use the same idea, but maybe just clean it up a little bit. But one of the things on this car that kind of made me a little not confused, but just like I didn't know what the stuff was. So the steering box, when we got the car and we take it apart, I wasn't quite sure what it was. Steering box is not a typical Ford box you would see. It's not an F1 steering box or something like that is common, that is real popular nowadays. I've found more and more as I mess with these old hot rods that were built back in the day that guys really did use whatever they could find and fit. So this steering box is nothing close to a Ford product. I started looking at it and it looked like a GM steering box. The pitman arm, the way it looks, I don't even know where I have it now, but the pitman arm looked like a GM pitman arm just from some of the other odd steering boxes I've had over the years and seen on old hot rods. So I started running the numbers and wire brushing. It has a Saginaw gear marking on the side, which I believe is a GM type thing. And then I did uncover some numbers on the other side, which ended up, once I did some Googling with my smartphone, turned out to be like 36 to 39 or 36, 37, I'm not quite sure exactly the year range, Buick steering box. So I knew this looked familiar because I had recently got a steering box just like this and some stuff that I got, and I don't know if it might be outside my bin somewhere of steering boxes, or maybe I scrapped it, I hope not, but this steering box seemed to work pretty well in the car. The car steered fine for when we were rolling it around, so I'm going to try and reuse it. We'll probably take it apart when we get to that stage of actually cleaning up the stuff to rebuild it, make sure that nothing inside's like damaged or worn real bad, and hopefully we can put it back together and adjust it and just use it. So I wanted to mount the steering box. The whole roundabout way of this was A, I figured out what the heck this thing had, and B, I wanted to see why they had smashed in the steering box, or I'm sorry, the frame for the steering box. So they had these little spacers that they had behind the bolts, and there's like stacks of washers. I mean, this is just typical backyard hot rodding stuff. I'm not talking crap, I'm just saying this is what you see. So when I redo this car, you know, I'm trying to retain some of the stuff, but maybe just do it a little better. So I'm going to try and get the steering box kind of mounted up by myself, which is always difficult. Alright, with the steering box mounted, you can actually see there's plenty of clearance there, and if we kind of set our straight edge across where the frame isn't damaged, it doesn't look like the box would have really hit with the frame not modified. I think they just kind of were probably trying to fit it with the firewall in place, and they just bent it so that they could like hook it in. But I think if you put the steering box in with the firewall out where you can kind of come in straight and maybe no steering wheel, there wouldn't be an issue, because it looks like there is tons of space here. I mean, I can get a whole finger underneath of the steering box there. So it's not like it's like that insanely tight. It's a little tight once it gets into like right here. It's starting to get tight, but like way out here where they have it flared and it looks kind of ugly, totally unnecessary. So I think what I'm gonna do is I need to probably get an extra set of hands. We'll see. Maybe I'll try it by myself. But I need to get the torch out and heat this area because this is thicker metal, and probably hammer it around a little bit. I'll probably start by cold bending it with just like an adjustable wrench or something like that, like they probably did to get this flare down. Maybe I can massage it out and make it a little better. We're not gonna be able to make it like perfect, but we should be able to kind of make it look a little bit better than that. And with the steering box in place, maybe if I heat it and tap it down, I can kind of check my progress as I go. Start by getting just this edge knocked down. even if I can dolly this and make this little rise in the frame rail a little, I don't know, more uniform, it might work right there. It's just off of the steering box right there. So we could have just a real subtle rise in the frame instead of this huge gouged up frame. Otherwise I'm gonna have to like cut a notch out, and I don't really love that. So I think without messing up the integrity of the frame or having to do something crazy, I'm gonna take the steering box out now, because I pretty much know I can't go much lower than what it is like right here. I'll probably make some marks, remind myself, and then what I can do is just kind of tap around. We're gonna heat and use a hammer and the BFH and a dolly and kind of knock some stuff around and get it flattened out. As you can see with the Rosebud, this metal moves around real easy, so it won't take a lot to kind of knock stuff back down and get it kind of formed into the shape we need. And then the frame will just have just a little rise here, but it'll look a little more natural than it all bent up and tweaked and done with a pair of channel locks or adjustable wrench. Whew. I'll give you a workout. All right, so I got everything all flattened out. I took the box in and out a couple times, and the frame is pretty much flat. Now it's not what I would call metal finished or anything like that. It's still got some waves to it, but we don't have that huge bulge in the frame here. And what I ended up doing is this boss right here that is for this bolt, basically right about there, like in here, there was like a rough casting mark or casting line or whatever you want to call it. It was like a sharp edge, and it was raised up a little bit, that was causing it to hit real hard here. And I think that's probably why they bent the frame. They probably tried to put it in and it just hit and didn't tighten down right, so they just took an adjustable wrench and bent it real quick, and you know, worked real quick and easy. So what I did was I took the flat disc, and it's hard to see here, but it's hidden back in here some, but I just rounded the corners on this little boss here all around, took that casting mark off and just sanded it a little bit, didn't make it real thin or anything, just kind of knocked the corners of the casting down, and it fits. There's just, you know, a tiny bit of room in between there. I'm gonna let it go. It may lose a little bit of paint when it bolts it together, but I'm not too concerned about that because it fits. It doesn't have like a huge bulge. There's a little spot here in the frame that I may try and knock down and get flat, but otherwise steering box fits. We don't have a huge bulge in the frame. It looks real ugly. So moving along. So I'm going to take the steering box out, and I'm going to work this area kind of like I did my patches through here that you guys can see. I worked all those patches that we did with the sharp bites and kind of finished them out pretty nicely, so you can't tell that it's ever been damaged. So I'm going to do a similar thing here. I'm probably not going to go as crazy because it's right by the firewall. This is the firewall foot with the steering box there and headers. It's not going to be seen that much, but I am going to try and finish it out a little bit better. right, so in the last couple shots there you saw I was spraying the frame down with Fast Etch, Eastwood Fast Etch. I basically use that to lightly mist over the frame. It cleans the frame, it cleans the metal, and it also will seal everything up, leaves like a phosphoric coating where the frame can sit here and it's not going to flash rust from touching it, and it's a great base for putting epoxy primer over when we get to that step. So the shots before that, what I was doing is I was actually using a gas welder or oxyacetylene welder to weld with a torch the old school way. I thought it would be cool with the brackets that were left on the frame that we were retaining. Some of those brackets, they didn't fully weld them, like they welded two sides but they didn't weld the third side. So I went over them with the torch and just did some gas welding to weld those up. So that way underneath it matched exactly what the frame had on it before. I thought that if I grabbed the MIG welder and just buzzed it in there with the MIG welder or tried to make it nicer and use the TIG welder, then we're balancing on that area of making it like too nice. So there's some areas like that where the brackets are on the frame. I'm not going to go over them. If there's anything that was like not fully welded, I went over it with the torch and gas welded everything, and it worked out pretty good. My gas welding is probably equivalent to what like an 18-year-old kid was doing back in the day, because I am horribly out of practice. I don't do it enough, but there by the end of the last bracket, I kind of was getting it. So that's all done now. Looks really good. I got it flipped over, and I am really psyched. This thing turned out way better than I was expecting, and went a lot faster. So next things that I have to do is I need to roll the front and rear suspension in, and mainly the rear suspension. I need to roll it underneath the car, set those radius rods up, and put some threaded like rod ends, or actually tie rod ends on there, some big beefy ones, and then make some new tabs that I'm going to weld into the existing brackets so we can actually have tie rod ends hooked in there that's a little bit safer than what they had before with the threaded rod. And I will gas weld some tabs into the existing bracket so it all looks like it was done back in the day, and it should be good. So it should be pretty fun to kind of do this, a jump between the old school methods and the new school methods. It's really fun for me and keeps it interesting. And when the car is all set and done, it'll kind of make it look like underneath the car like we didn't really do anything. We just kind of made it a little more refined. So that's all I have for this one. Appreciate you guys following along. This is like a week's worth of work, but I am glad it's done, and I can't wait to get on to the next steps of putting the Schroll Coupe back on the road. Thanks, guys. Catch you later.